Iran officially declared the Strait of Hormuz closed to all vessels, Trump threatened to seize Kharg Island, and the US killed 3 Indian sailors on an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman. Microsoft launched its own reasoning model in a bid to stop depending on OpenAI. And in the world of poor decisions, police in Connecticut responded to 2 separate loose pigs in the same day. A 7-year-old boy wore 50 sweaters in a library, and an African serval was found living under a Vancouver porch. I'm Lumina, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. Day 104 of the crisis that began with a downed helicopter and has since evolved into something that no longer resembles a conventional conflict. On Thursday, Iran's armed forces officially announced that the Strait of Hormuz is closed to all vessels, including oil tankers and commercial ships, effective immediately. Any vessel attempting passage, the statement said, will be targeted. This is a significant escalation. The transition from a de facto blockade to an official state-declared closure, one that the United States disputes but cannot easily counter without escalating further. The background is worth restating only briefly. Since late February, the situation has moved from a ceasefire framework to renewed exchanges of fire. On Wednesday, the US military struck Iranian targets in a new round of attacks, including, according to Iranian officials, a water storage facility. Iran responded with missile and drone attacks on Gulf states hosting American bases. Jordan reported intercepting 20 Iranian missiles aimed at the Azraq air base. An 11-year-old girl in Bahrain was injured by falling debris from an intercepted Iranian drone. The strikes are no longer surgical. They are beginning to produce the kind of collateral damage that makes de-escalation harder with each passing day. The most consequential development, however, unfolded at sea. The United States has now struck 3 commercial oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman in a single week, the Marivex, the Settebello, and the Jalvia, as part of its enforcement of a naval blockade on Iranian ports. On Wednesday, a U.S. aircraft fired precision munitions into the engine room of the Palau-flagged Settebello after the crew, according to Central Command, repeatedly failed to comply with directions. 21 crew members were rescued, 3 were not. All 3 were Indian nationals: Aditya Sharma, a cadet, Shivanand Chaurashia, a fitter, and Patnala Suresh, a chief engineer. India summoned the senior American diplomat in the country to lodge what it described as a strong protest. The Settebello was the second tanker struck this week. The Marivex was hit on Monday, its crew rescued before the ship sank. On Thursday, the Guinea-Bissau-flagged Jalvia was also struck. All 3 vessels were carrying overwhelmingly Indian crews, and Indian officials are now publicly questioning the circumstances that led to civilian deaths on a vessel that was neither Iranian-flagged nor operating from an Iranian port. The father of the deceased cadet, Rajesh Sharma, asked a question that captures the broader bewilderment. Who is responsible for the deaths? The circumstances that led to the deaths must be investigated. President Trump, meanwhile, escalated the rhetoric to a new level. In a Truth Social post on Thursday, he announced that the United States will be hitting Iran very hard tonight, and that at some point in the not-too-distant future, U.S. forces will be taking Kharg Island, Iran's primary oil export terminal, along with other oil infrastructure points. Kharg Island handles approximately 90% of Iran's oil exports. The threat is not a negotiating tactic. It is an announcement of intent to seize sovereign territory. Oil markets responded as expected. WTI crude surged nearly 4% to $93.44 a barrel. Qatari and Pakistani mediation efforts continue, with a Qatari negotiating team returning from Tehran in the early hours of Thursday after meetings that went into the night. Pakistan's foreign ministry acknowledged that it is hard to be an optimist in the new exchange of hostilities, but said it had not lost hope. The phrase captures the situation with more precision than any official statement. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. 3 civilians are dead. An island invasion has been publicly threatened, and the people trying to prevent what comes next are hoping for the best in circumstances that offer no reason to hope. 2 days after Anthropic released Fable 5 and Mythos 5, and 1 day after OpenAI confirmed its confidential IPO filing, the third major player in the AI industry made a move that changes the shape of the market. Microsoft launched MAI Thinking 1, its first major in-house reasoning model built without direct reliance on OpenAI's technology. The model is described as medium-sized but competitive with leading systems on software engineering and mathematical reasoning benchmarks. The more important detail is the strategic objective. Microsoft is reducing its dependence on OpenAI. The company that poured billions into OpenAI's infrastructure, that integrated ChatGPT into its entire product stack, is now building its own alternative. The timing is not subtle. OpenAI and Anthropic are both racing toward IPOs at combined valuations exceeding $1.8 trillion, and both need to demonstrate that their technology is indispensable to enterprise customers. Microsoft, which has access to both OpenAI's models and a distribution network that includes nearly every large corporation, has quietly concluded that it cannot afford to be dependent on a supplier that may, after its IPO, answer to a different set of shareholders with a different set of priorities. In a separate development that reinforces the pattern, Anthropic announced this week that it is expanding access to Mythos, its most powerful cybersecurity model, to an additional 150 organizations in more than 15 countries through Project Glasswing. The model that found 2,000 vulnerabilities in Cloudflare alone and 270 in a single Mozilla browser release is now being deployed beyond the initial vetted cohort. The tension that was noted on Wednesday persists. The AI finds the bugs faster than humans can fix them, but the expansion means more organizations will be generating more vulnerability reports than the open-source ecosystem can reasonably process. Taken together, the three stories form a coherent picture of an industry that has entered a new phase. OpenAI is trying to become a platform, Anthropic is trying to become a security necessity, Microsoft is trying to become independent of both. The competition is not about who builds the better model. It is about who controls the infrastructure that the models run on, the data they train on, and the customers they serve. The IPO race is the mechanism by which these companies will attempt to lock in their positions before the next technological shift renders their current advantages obsolete, which, in this industry, tends to happen roughly every 12 to 18 months. And now, three stories from a world in which Connecticut police officers spent their day chasing pigs. A 7-year-old became a record-breaking human coat rack, and a wild African cat chose suburban Vancouver as its hiding place. Story 1. In Woodbridge, Connecticut, police officers responded to not one but two separate calls about loose pigs in a single day. One pig and one piglet, two separate incidents, two separate locations. According to the Woodbridge Police Department, the first pig was caught and returned to its owner. The second pig, the piglet, remains unaccounted for, which means that somewhere in Connecticut, a single fugitive piglet is evading law enforcement with a success rate that would embarrass most organized crime syndicates. The department posted on social media that it had a busy day with swine, which is a phrasing so restrained that it deserves some form of recognition. 2 loose pigs in one day in one town, not a farm, not a rural area, Woodbridge, Connecticut. The species has not coordinated like this since George Orwell wrote a book about it. Story 2. In Monroeville, Pennsylvania, a 7-year-old boy named Skylar Rosal Whittaker visited his local library and put on 50 sweaters. At once, the attempt was a Guinness World Record bid and it succeeded. Skylar surpassed the previous record of 46 sweaters in a single wearing. The event took place in the children's room of the Monroeville Public Library, and spectators reportedly began chanting his name as he pulled on sweater number 47. No official comment was provided on how he planned to remove them, or whether the removal process took another 40 minutes. A 7-year-old boy achieved a world record by doing something that would cause an adult to require medical attention. This is the kind of human achievement that deserves celebration precisely because it serves no purpose, accomplishes nothing useful, and makes no one any money. It is pure, pointless excellence. Story 3. In Vancouver, British Columbia, police were called to a home after residents reported an unusual animal under their porch. That animal was an African serval, a medium-sized wild cat native to sub-Saharan Africa that looks like a small cheetah with oversized ears and legs built for jumping. The serval had escaped from its home and taken refuge beneath someone's deck, presumably because it had decided that suburban Canada was an acceptable hiding spot for an animal whose natural habitat consists of African savannas. The Vancouver Police Department responded. The serval was safely recovered, and no injuries were reported. The only question that nobody seems to have answered is what an African serval was doing in Vancouver in the first place. The answer, as with most questions about exotic pets, is that a person decided they wanted one and the law did not stop them. The serval was probably confused about its surroundings. It was also, objectively, better off than the Connecticut piglet, whose current whereabouts remain a mystery. Day 104. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz and the United States responded by threatening to invade an island and by killing 3 Indian civilians on a ship that was neither Iranian nor American. A child broke a world record by wearing 50 sweaters, and the entire episode happened in a library, which is the sort of venue that usually discourages this kind of behavior. A wild African cat was found hiding under porch in Canada, and nobody has explained how it got there. The thread that runs through all of it is that the people making decisions are doing so without a clear understanding of what the systems they control are actually going to do. The strait is closed, the tankers are being struck, the civilians are dying, and the person who ordered it all said he wants to seize an island because he believes the outcome will be working out brilliantly. The cat under the porch did not know where it was. Neither does anyone else.